This is a seminar on From Science to Spirituality, and a hot topic because it's the age of science. And past 300 years, we had a scientific paradigm. People believe in science, and science is observation, theory, experiment, theory, then predictions. That's what is a Baconian method we generally follow in science, isn't it? But things are changing now within scientific paradigm. And that's why I named this seminar From Science to Spirituality. Before I start, let me just tell you, many great thinkers of religion and philosophy, they have been talking about consciousness and spirituality and soul. So right from Greek philosophers like Plato and Socrates, they have been talking about some other word and consciousness and ideas. And also philosophers in the East like Kanad, Gautam, Vishaishika, Vyasadeva, they have been talking about consciousness and soul separate from body. All over the world, philosophers from Islamic world, they have been talking about consciousness. Buddhism, Judeo-Christian tradition, and in fact Chinese philosophers also, some of them, for example Bodhidharma and all this Zen religion, they talk about consciousness. We know that. Even Confucius and Lao Tzu, who were so much pressing upon morals, they also in their work talk about something beyond what you see, beyond the phenomenal world what you see. So people have been talking about soul and consciousness and mind separate from matter. That was going on. But then there was another take of science which said, no, what we see, that's the reality. What we don't see, that's not the reality. And that's matter about. And that was done by René Descartes. Everybody knows him. Dualistic theory. He separated philosophy and religion forever. He said, well, what we see, what we can manipulate, that's matter. Let that be with us, scientists. And let soul and consciousness be with the church. Let them handle that. Let us handle this. And there was a divide there. And science and philosophy separated. Because previously, there were no scientists and no philosophers. They were natural philosophers, they used to call them, isn't it? Newton and all of them. But later it split. And then from philosophy, another branch split, that is of psychology. It split from there. So there were leaves, separating. It was just one unified knowledge, and slowly things got different. So all great thinkers of religion and philosophy, they were talking about all these things. But the question is, before I go into this topic of consciousness and soul, which people were talking about, just few minutes I want to tell what do I mean by consciousness, which I'll be talking about in this talk. Now consciousness, in English, consciousness word is used, be conscious, isn't it? Just in a very ordinary sense. Are you conscious of the fact? That's very ordinary sense, but I'm not talking about that thing here. Consciousness, according to many philosophies, and especially Vedic tradition, is a particular is a thing. It's an energy. According to science, we know 4 types of energy now. That's what we know. Gravitational energy, or force, you can say. And then mechanical energy or force, kinetic potential, isn't it? And then what else? Quantum, nuclear energy, you see, on the microscopic level. That's nuclear energy. That's what we know. And electromagnetic energy, that's electricity in your wires. This is what we accept. 4 types of forces or energy. But then there is 5th type of energy, which we don't know, which Vedic tradition and all philosophers are talking about. That's called consciousness. That's there in all living beings. Now, you see, we are made of, according to Vedic tradition, we have this body, that's there, down, We have a mind and we have consciousness. That's the model there, which is universally accepted in, at least in Vedic tradition and many philosophies. We have this body, then inside their mind, and then there is consciousness. Now, what is consciousness? What does consciousness do? Consciousness is a type of energy, let's say fifth energy, which we don't know, which Vedas are proposing, that powers the mind and the body. Just like your electricity powers this bulb and tubes, consciousness powers a mind and body. A mind keeps on working, thinking, feeling and willing, isn't it? That's what mind does. We think, we feel something, and we have some intentions. We want to do something. Intentions, action. And that power to mind to think, feel and will, that's given by consciousness. That's the energy working there behind. And a body moves. And we do so many things from where this power is coming. That's consciousness. That's the Vedic model. So function of consciousness to power the mental processes and awareness of those processes and the body. We are aware what we are thinking, isn't it? Sometimes you're not aware. Sometimes you're sitting in the class and you're listening something and you're not aware what you're listening. And after 5 minutes, oh yeah, something is going on in the class, isn't it? Sometimes you're thinking something and suddenly it clicks to you, oh, I'm thinking this. You don't know what you're exactly thinking, isn't it? So, awareness of your thoughts, feelings, and willing, that is consciousness. This power and awareness. And consciousness is separate from body but pervading the body, just like wire and electricity. This is the example given by Srila Prabhupada. Now, you have a wire and electricity running in that wire. Similarly, you have this body, and consciousness is running in a body, isn't it? Okay, fine, let me ask you. Do you know, is there an ant on the thumb of your right foot? Can you tell me? Yes or no? I'm asking you all. No. How do you know that? You didn't see. You don't even do like this. You didn't even see like this. Yes, no. Because you're aware of your right thumb. So this energy is all over the body. And due to this energy, we are aware what's happening in our body everywhere. Even in a single pore of the hair, we know what's happening, isn't it? That's called awareness. Not only this body, we are aware of a mind, how a mind is shifting thoughts. We think something, then mind is thinking something. Sometimes we say, we can't control our mind. What's happening? We are aware of those things. That is awareness. This is function. So consciousness is separate from body. You can't separate electricity from wire, but nevertheless electricity is flowing in wire. When you stop electricity, source, then it goes. Otherwise, how can you separate it? You can't separate. But nevertheless, we know electricity is separate from wire. Similarly, consciousness is separate from body. And the source of consciousness is soul. If consciousness is energy, there has to be a source of it, isn't it? Sun's energy, the source is sun. Isn't it? Electromagnetic energy, the source is atoms. Okay, so that's how we work. So there's soul, consciousness, mind and body. You understood? That's a Vedic model. We understand that. Okay, having said that, what's the proof of that? That's the point there now. Now, it looks nice. It is good. Very nice. Very good. It explains everything. But then, what's the proof of consciousness? Is there any scientific proof? That's the point. Not just philosophical. We don't just want logic because it's the age of science. Is there any evidence? Let's use the term evidence. That's a very popular term, isn't it? If you go to America, everybody will ask, well, what's evidence? In the West, what's the evidence? Okay, fine. Can we scientifically prove the existence of consciousness as an energy, as separate from body? Can we prove that? Now, that's what I'm going to talk today. That's the talk of this seminar. From science to spirituality, the link between science to spirituality is consciousness. And something weird is happening in science. People are coming to recognize this consciousness as a hard problem. I'll talk about this in a few moments. It's a problem they can recognize. See, the point is, the greatest truth in our life is we are conscious, isn't it? There's no other higher truth than that. Everything else can be illusion. Everything can be matrix, isn't it? Can be virtual. It can be virtual reality. But as far as consciousness is concerned, you all know you're conscious, isn't it? You're alive. You know within yourself. That's common sense. You can't debate on this, isn't it? Now, but we have to prove it scientifically, okay? Before that, let me talk about proof. Self-evident truth versus logical proof. Now, when we talk of proof of something, one thing is that we assume that everything can be proved. Now, that's an assumption, by the way. Everything cannot be proved. Some things are beyond proof. Now, that habit of asking proof is itself wrong. Because, for example, aesthetics. And that's what happened to science. Science gave some departments to philosophy which it cannot prove, it cannot handle. How to even handle these subjects, we don't know. Aesthetics. Can you prove love scientifically? Can you do that? Can you even begin to think how to do that? We can't do that. You don't have any quantification. Something. So yeah. So probably you can take your brain scan and see some area, which is lighting. And then you can tell he's fallen in love with that person. But that doesn't happen like that. You can't prove love, but yet it's a reality. Isn't it? Can you prove existence of pain? You go to a doctor, okay, doctor, I have a pain. Doctor says, bring a proof first. Bring evidence. No, it doesn't happen like that, isn't it? In our life, we accept some self-evident truth. It is self-evident to you that you are in pain. But you can't prove it to me. You cannot prove it to me that you are in pain. It's impossible. You can show that there are some C fibers exciting. C fibers? C fibers are for pain. Nerve fibers. You can show that there's excitement in C fibers and excitement in some area of the brain. But nevertheless, you cannot give me the experience of pain. You understand? That is a hard problem. Experience is a reality. You are experiencing. And science claims to understand reality. But yet, experience is a reality which science cannot capture. To capture, you have to quantify it, you have to catch it. But what do you do with that? Isn't it? So hunger is a self-evident truth. You know you're hungry, it's okay. Even if all the scientists of the world come and take your brain scans and do all hormonal checkups and they prove to you you're not hungry, what will you say? Well, give me a pizza and then I'll talk to you. Nobody can make you convinced you're not hungry if you're hungry. That's a self-evident truth. Okay, having said this, now there's a question now. Can you prove to me you're conscious? Can anybody prove to me you're conscious? Can you do that?
I don't understand why anybody else would be interested in somebody else's consciousness. You know, because it's very personal. The fact that somebody
What's he saying?
you shouldn't even have to do, you know.
Oh, I can't really get the point.
Personal thing, so
Okay, fine.
would someone be interested in improving science?
No, why? Because science is demanding proof. That's science. Yeah, you're right. Morals, yeah. Morals you can't prove.
The morons and the
Morons? What's that, morons? What's that? Fool? About, what's that fool about? Oh, okay. Okay, well, fine. Science goes like that. It needs evidence. That's the problem with science. So, okay, fine. So can you prove me to you're conscious? That's where science begins. That's where the science of consciousness begins. That's people started asking. 50 years back, people started asking, can we prove that a person is conscious? And from that, various philosophies were born, skepticism and many other philosophies. Now, can you prove you're conscious to me? Can you prove that you're conscious? You cannot do that, isn't it? I can never know that you're conscious. But you know that you're conscious, isn't it? You can be zombies. How do I know that? You're doing everything what a zombie does. You can be a Genesis or Terminator, a carbon-based machine. How do I know that? You are conscious within. I can never know that. I can know for myself, you can know for yourself. Your experience of consciousness is locked within you. You cannot share with anybody. And that's the problem. Because it is very subjective, science cannot handle it, isn't it? Science goes with objective things. And that David Chalmers, so David Chalmers is a psychologist and consciousness scientist in America. I was supposed to meet him, but somehow we couldn't meet. He named this problem as hard problem in science. There's a soft problem and hard problem. Soft problem is brain functions. Okay, you can catch hold brain functions, isn't it? You can see the areas, what areas are doing what. But as far as experience is concerned, we don't know how it's happening. In fact, some dead nerve cells producing a conscious live experience, that jump, nobody knows how it happens, isn't it? Nerves are dead. Nerves have chemicals. Brain, it's all chemicals. How does chemical bring a conscious experience? Nobody understands that. So that's the hard problem in science, and that's what is called self-evident truth. You know it's true.
So science is also interested from the medical perspective. If somebody is very ill in a hospital and in a coma, the doctor
Coma, yeah.
want to know, are they conscious or can they,
Yeah, actually you're right.
whatever. So
And there's
it's a hard problem.
and there's a problem there, yeah, I'll talk about that now. So, okay, fine. So, having said that, consciousness is not subjected to logical proof. It's a self-evident truth. Do you all understand this concept, no? Self-evident truth. Okay, having said that, how do we go about using science to prove something that we are conscious and consciousness separate from body? What is consciousness? Now, science is trying to grapple with that fact. So what science can do, science can give some hints. Science cannot give a proof, but can give hints that we are separate from this body. Consciousness can work beyond this body. We are not limited to this body, which all philosophers and religionists were talking about. Okay, so what are the hints which science gives us that consciousness can work without body? It is separate from body. Okay, the first proof comes from consciousness studies. Now, this is a new branch of studies, and this department is in Detroit. I saw that Michigan University. It's just coming up, this new field of study in Virginia and New York. And this study, consciousness study, combines neuroscience, psychology, philosophy. When you combine these three subjects, you have consciousness studies, probably artificial intelligence also. So these people, they started wondering something. What happened was, last 300 years, especially in 100 years, we were convinced human body is a machine. Especially with the invention of computers. So, okay, fine. Computers, hardware and software. Okay, fine. So this is hardware and consciousness is a software. Now we can understand. Okay, it's okay. We are a machine. Fine. It's done. But then there were problems. Some problems came up. And these people, consciousness studies people, they started studying this. And one of the person is David Chalmers and others, Thomas Nagel and all these people. And they saw a very peculiar thing. And what they saw was this. It's simple but peculiar. Computers cannot fall in love. Your Dell can't propose to Mac. Or maybe Apple. It can never happen. Although they are assuming that, but it can't happen. So how, if we are machines, then machines should also fall in love, but it doesn't make any sense. If you want a computer, it's just electrical signals. It's just capacitors. If you come down to that, it's just charges, That's all. And there are some circuits, that's all. What about love? How do you put love in computers? Nobody has any idea. Nobody is even thinking about that. Huh? Well, yeah. what's happening. Okay. Computers cannot decide right from wrong. Morals. I can give you a computer, but how to use, that's up to you. That's all. That is why ethics is a part of philosophy, not science, by the way. They don't know how to handle it. They can't tell you what's right and wrong. They can give you Apple iPhone, but then what you do with that, that's up to you. That's a conscious decision. That's not a logical decision of brute force. It's not like that. And the third thing is computers cannot think. Now this is important because MIT guys, they were thinking that computers can think. And you know what's this? You know who is this? Simple. Garry Kasparov. You have heard about Garry Kasparov. He's a world chess champion. And MIT people were thinking 1994 or something. They were thinking, well, if we can make a chess game, computer game, and if we can defeat a chess champion, then it means computers can think. So at least we have got something, of consciousness, thinking, feeling, and willing. So one aspect of consciousness we have figured out, how to think. So they invented this computer, Deep Blue. This is playing with that. This person is just an intermediate. So 1997, they had a match, Garry Kasparov and Deep Blue. And by the way, Deep Blue won. And they said, oh yeah, now computers can think. But there was a problem there. And there was one person in MIT, Rupert Dreyfus, who after this match wrote a book, Computers Cannot Think. Why? Because there were 6 matches in total. 1 was neutral. 4 match Deep Blue won. 1 match Garry Kasparov won. And that was impossible because Deep Blue was calculating. Have you played chess? Somebody? You have to think forward, next moves. Deep Blue was calculating 200 billion moves in 1 second. Future. Garry Kasparov was thinking 4 moves. If you calculate chances mathematically, it's impossible for Garry Kasparov to win, but still he win one game. And that was the problem there. Although he lost the tournament, but still he won the game because that was a problem. And Rupert Dreyfus, he wrote a book, Computers Cannot Think. And after 10 years, he wrote another book, Computers Still Cannot Think. And still computers cannot think. You know why? Because Deep Blue is not thinking. Deep Blue is using brute force. You have heard this computer language, brute force? You use brute force. You do logic in such a speed. Speed of calculation of computers is very fast. And that's why it seems it is thinking. Now, Rupert Dreyfus brought a point there. Let me ask you. Is this statement true or false? What do you say? Yeah, you simply laugh, isn't it? So, if you give this statement to a computer, what is going to do? Okay, print true or false. Huh? What's it going to do? Actually, yeah. That's called halting problem. Seriously, that's a technical term, halting problem. It will halt. Because it doesn't know. If you speak true, it's false. It's false, it's true. So it halts. Of course, it can't laugh, first of all. We see and laugh. That, of course, cannot do. It halts. That's halting problem. That's a big problem in computers. Like, for example, let me ask you. Okay, you have to answer this quickly. Quickly now. That's, now, A plus B is equal to B plus A. Is it correct or wrong? Quick. Is it correct or wrong? A plus B is equal to B plus A. What about others? Yeah, correct, isn't it? It's like this. If you give this equation to computer and ask whether it's correct or not, what's going to do? It will halt. This is a big halting problem. You know why? Because it will start putting values. 1 plus 2 is equal to 2 plus 1. 2 plus 3 is equal to 3 plus 2. How many numbers are there? Infinite numbers are there. Mathematically, it will keep on calculating till infinity and cannot print the result. It's a halting problem. There are many problems like that, halting problems, NP problems like this. And these problems are used in your security alarms. Security. Because to crack a code, If you put a halting problem there, you can't crack a code. Computer halts. You see? So, why computer cannot do all these things? Because there are two types of thinking. One is logical thinking and one is intuitional thinking. You see? Here we are using intuition, A plus B is equal to B plus A. This statement is false. By intuition we can understand. Neither we can say true, neither we can say false, and we start laughing. We understand this statement, by the way. Although it's not understandable. That is intuition. So, Rupert Dreyfus said that, well, computers can do logical thinking. That's okay, logic, but intuitional thinking, it's not there. So that is consciousness, intuitional thinking. So thinking, feeling, that is love, and willing, that is action, that is intentions. That is symptom of consciousness separate from machine. Anywhere you see these three symptoms, thinking, feeling, and willing. Willing means ethics, deciding what is right, what is wrong. Anywhere you see these three, you can immediately come to conclusion there is consciousness working behind. Consciousness is there. That's what our scriptures have been talking about since millions of years. And now these people, scientists are now coming to this fact. Okay, this is the problem there. So consciousness is separate from this body. We can understand, we can get some hint by that. It's not just brains and chemicals. It is not just this body. We are not just machines like computers. There's a difference. There's something in us which is not there in computers, which is allowing us to feel, think intuitionally, and decide morally, isn't it? That's what now consciousness studies are coming to understand. There's some hint there. That's why Thomas Nagel, he's a famous philosopher. He said, eventually I believe current attempts to understand the mind or consciousness, let's take mind and consciousness interchangeable for now, by analogy with man-made computers that can perform superbly some of external tasks a conscious being performs, will be recognized as a gigantic waste of time. He said, you cannot replicate consciousness in your machines. You cannot do that, no matter how much you can fantasize. And there are certain group of computer scientists like Ray Kurzweil and all these people. They are saying after 50 years we'll be more conscious than a human, and this and that. And then there are movies made on this, But many scientists do not believe. Second hint comes from science of neurology and brain. This is where I was talking about. Coma. It's talking about coma now. And that's what you were talking about there? So, people who are neurologists, they study coma patients. In fact, I was a doctor and I handled many coma patients. And coma patients are basically brain death. They are brain death. We have different level of coma. There's something called as vegetative state, but then below that is coma. These coma patients, they don't have sleep and wake cycle. We have sleep and wake cycle. We sleep. They have no reflexes, autonomic reflexes. It's finished. Their brain is practically dead, except some breathing is going on, little bit, and heart is going. That's all. So I've seen many patients in coma, but you know what's the most interesting part in coma patients? I had few patients in coma, and even in coma, they should not see, they should not feel, they should not hear. Their brain is dead. But in spite of that, all doctors all over the world, they know coma patients can hear. Their hearing is active. In fact, for few of my patients, we were reading Bhagavad Gita to coma patients, chanting. And some coma patients, they revived after 5 years, and they said, the first thing they said, doctor, what you were chanting? We want to hear that. And that's a very common phenomena. And how this hearing is working in comatose patient, we don't really understand. But if you accept the Vedic model that consciousness can work beyond brain and beyond body, it is separate from brain and body, then it is easy to understand that, well, the patients can hear. They can hear. It's a very common phenomenon. We all know that as doctors in comatose patients. But it's not documented because patients don't like to get this documented. They think, people will think us crazy and this and that. It doesn't happen like that. That's the problem there. And there are people with no brains. What do you do with them? Is brain necessary for life? Not exactly. And there are some patients, this is from New Scientist, a reputed magazine. And I'm just quoting one case. There are many cases all around the world. Now, this condition is called hydroencephalus. You see, this is normal brain, anterior and lateral. This is Lorzer-Lewin's brain. You see, it's just empty. Nothing is there. This person, he is student in MIT. An MIT person, you might understand, he has to be intelligent, He is not mentally retarded. He's average intelligence, even more than average. And he got a headache. He went for CT scan and they said, you know what, there's a problem. You don't have a brain. How do we advise you anything? There are people like that. No brain. It's just very thin layer of gray matter. That's all. Very thin layer, practically nothing. No, he doesn't have nothing. So how do you understand all these things? We as doctors, we read about that hydroencephalus, but our teachers didn't comment on this. Our books don't comment on this. Because if you accept such cases, you have to change science. You have to bring a paradigm shift in science. This shows, by the way, brain is a limitation on consciousness. That's our Vedic tradition saying. This body and brain is a limitation, by the way. And that is why we talk of liberation. When you're liberated from this body and brain and you can function without this body and brain, you're liberated from this limitation. You can do much more what you can do now. That's the idea there. So these people are there. Maybe we can check our own CT scan. Maybe we don't have a brain. Who knows?
It's not a rule, is it? Because I think I've seen someone with that.
Mostly these people die when they are child, but many people are alive. He's like 44 years old person. Many people are alive, but they don't know that they don't have a brain. Because unless you get a CT scan or something, they don't realize that. And they're very normal functioning people. So these are some hints, science has to accept these cases in the scientific paradigm and then explain it. Then science can advance. And these consciousness studies people, they are talking about all these things, now. Yeah, it's not taught.
I'm 61 years old. And
Yeah, it's not taught. Yeah. It's not taught. It's not taught. So I was working as a doctor in India for many years in hospital, and we were just passed by as a mention hydroencephalus, but we were also not taught. Because then you have to give explanation. Then what do you do with that? So nobody talks about these things. Yeah. So then what do you do with this? Because if it is taught, then there's a problem. Then you can't explain.
How is this thing, if this is just like, I guess, say there's two types of mechanism you talked about. The mechanism which is like our physical material self, and there's a mechanism which is our conscious self.
Yeah.
So how we escape, like how we liberate it, because it's just another.
Okay. Yeah. Fine. Yeah. So these questions I'll take it last. It's a very valid question. Thank you for that. But let's discuss this. So there's no brain there. So that's why Thomas Henry Huxley. You know who was he? Huxley. Huxley was a bulldog of Darwin. You know Darwin? Darwin. Everybody knows. He was a person who made Darwin famous. That means he was an evolutionist. And evolutionists are the last people who is going to accept the existence of consciousness and something like that. They don't accept, because the theories don't allow that. But he said, how is that anything so remarkable as state of consciousness comes about as a result of irritating nervous tissue? It's just as unaccountable as the appearance of jinn when Aladdin rubbed his lamp in the story. He was surprised. Nobody understands why consciousness is there, what is consciousness, how it appears from the brain. Nobody understands that. In fact, that is why many scientists, that is why Wilder Pinfield, he was father of neurosurgery. 1891, 1976. He said, now mark this statement, if he says it's going to be important. He's father of neurosurgery. He says, after a professional lifetime spent in trying to discover how brain accounts for consciousness, it comes as a surprise now to discover during final examination of the evidence. Now he talks of evidence. He's not saying superstition. That the consciousness separate from body hypothesis seems more reasonable of two possible explanations. You see the point there? So this is Wilder Penfield talking about evidence, and he says, well, it's good to accept that consciousness is separate from body rather than dogmatically saying consciousness is a product of brain, consciousness doesn't exist, it's all functioning of the brain. No, this is he saying.
Consciousness is separate from the body, then you get down a cycle and you start starting yourself, you know, and then get
What?
the body, you know.
What he's saying? I can't really understand.
I didn't hear myself earlier. Just speaking clear.
What's I can't understand. You speak fast, you know, I can't understand.
Once you accept consciousness as
Okay.
in the body, then that leads to asceticism and fasting and all, you know, so you can get liberated. You know, once it separates, then, you know what I mean? But if you don't accept
Okay, wait, yeah. These questions I'll take in the end. In the end, yeah. All these kind of questions, you know, but first you have to get convinced consciousness separate from body. That's the problem there. Okay, the third kind of field is parapsychology. We all know that. And the past life memories, you have heard about this past life memories, no? There are many scientists who have done researches in that, case control studies. Carl Stevenson, he's a famous guy. He's done 2,000 cases of reincarnation. I have seen many patients of reincarnation. Personally, I had a patient from Sri Lanka. His child was just 2 years old, Sri Lankan child. And so he's supposed to speak some Sri Lankan language, you know. But then he suddenly started speaking Scottish English. And a person who is speaking Scottish English, that's why I was asking you Scotland, you know. As an Indian, first of all, English speaking is difficult. English accent is difficult, and Scottish accent, how do you do that? You can't even brainwash that child, you know. If you imagine, you know, some theories, this child is brainwashed. He started speaking Scottish English, and then we called his parents in Scotland. Something happened, and his mother could recognize this is my child from previous, because mother can recognize, you know, the way of speaking. And so there are many cases. So one patient came from Jaipur. He said that. So he said that last life, he was my patient, that the last life he was in British Army in Jaipur, and he was shot. And he knows that there is a treasure hidden. The king of Jaipur, he hid the treasure, and he knows that, but he was shot. So he said, I can tell. So he approached the government and something, and then they went and they found the treasure. And he had a mark here of that bullet. Just like she has a mark. This lady, Shakuntala, she was from India, and she died because somebody hit her on the head here. And she has a mark, birthmark there. You have birthmarks. You carry the birthmark. So that's how past life memories are. Past life memories are not hocus pocus, and you know, there are studies done. You can't just reject it. It's all nonsense. In fact, Carl Stevenson, he writes his whole book, and the last page, Life After Life, he's written a book. And the last page, in the last line he writes, if this is not evidence, what I have given in this book, then I don't know what is the definition of evidence. He just full stops there. Yeah, that's another thing. Started off not believing, but then, yeah, that's a good input there. Okay, and there are many books. Please, you can go on Google, and you can especially read this book, Many Lives, Many Masters. It's a beautiful book. And then Life Before Life. This is also a good book. There are like around 100 more than 100 books written on reincarnation. Everybody's not fool, you know. Or there's no conspiracy theory, you know. These are happening. They're all around the world. Of course, scientists don't like to accept this, but you can't even make yourself blind to these facts. Okay, and then you have something called as out-of-body experience. You have heard this out-of-body experience? Now, generally in science, they don't accept out-of-body experience. They don't accept this. You know why? Because out-of-body experience means you leave the body, you're dead, practically, and you leave the body and you go up and see something and come back. So that's also called near-death experience. So generally they don't accept because they say this is hallucination. You know, all these things. There's a scientist, Susan Blackmore. She's anti, she's atheist. So she says, no, it's a hallucination. How do we know the person is dead? Maybe he's not dead. And he's just thinking in his mind. So all these things. So nobody took it very seriously before this case happened. And she is Pam Reynolds. You can go to YouTube, see her video. She has got a very good video. She's from West Virginia. She got a headache because this is her brain scan. And this is, you know what this? This is blood clot. Blood clot in her brain. So she got a headache. She went and they said, see, you see, we have to operate your brain. But the problem was this blood clot, if this is a brain, if here's a blood clot, you can just open the brain and get it out. But this blood clot is here. It's just in the center. So what to do? If you dissect the brain and go to this blood clot, you end up more bleeding rather than stopping, because brain is very rich in blood. If anybody who has seen brain, really, it's like blood. Live brain is like that. It's blood. It's bloody brain. That's what we say like that. So what to do? So that's why they had to do this standstill operation. This is never done because patients can die. But this was done on her. They said you have to choose, Anyway you're going to die if it burst. So better go for it. She said, okay, fine. So what is this operation? Her heart was stopped. This is normal heartbeat, you see. It's like almost stopped. Her heart and lungs were put in heart-lung machine. It's almost stopped. Her brain was almost stopped. These are normal waves. This is isoelectric line. By decreasing the temperature of brain to freezing point. They froze her brain. That's standstill operation. So if you freeze the brain, then you can cut the brain. Because the cells are frozen, they don't go into gangrene. You see gangrene? They don't die fast because they're frozen. Their metabolic rate goes down. They froze the brain. Her brain is dead. She can't feel. She can't do anything. And her lungs are also isoelectric. She's put on heart-lung machine. Practically, clinically, she's dead. She's dead for all practical purposes. You see the point? Now this is happening on operation theatre. We know she's dead. For 48 minutes, maximum you can go 48 minutes. After that, her brain cells will start necrosing. She'll die. So they have to do very fast, all these things. So she's dead. We know she's dead. But she got out-of-body experience now. At that, she left her body. She went to the ceiling and she saw everything, what's happening. She explained the procedure. You were using this instrument, what you were talking. She explained everything. Now scientists cannot say that she was having hallucination. We don't know whether she's dead or not. She's dead. It's a case control study. It's happening in operation theatre. And she had this case. That's why this case is very important for science. It can turn science upside down. And people are thinking what to do with this case. In fact, I had a case, not I, but my HOD. He had a case and he had this female, they were operating, and she got out of body experience, and then she came back and she sued the doctor because she had a cancer somewhere. They were doing operation, but then our HOD, anyway, it happens in operation theatre. He was flirting with a nurse there. Just like he was just talking, nonsense, flirting. This happens operation theatre. This happens, So she was surprised. I'm dying, and you're talking nonsense. It's such a serious matter and you're talking. So she sued and she won the case, by the way. She could explain everything, what doctors were talking and what. When you're being operated on brain, you can't hear, you can't do anything because they put plugs. Everything is blocked, you can't do anything. You can't even see. There's band there. So you can't do anything, but she told everything. So this shows that your consciousness can work separate from your body. It can And this is a hint by science. Now, having said that, about consciousness, there is something called a superconsciousness. And people are talking about this also. Now you see, I told you, consciousness is energy which is all pervading in this body, isn't it? So, if you replace this body with this word, so there is a consciousness behind this word which is making this word move, which is making this word caused, and that we call a superconsciousness. You understand? That's how. That's where this verse is. Yatha andam tatha pindam. Our bodies are a projection of entire universe. That's what body is all about. Reality is like a hologram. Many physicists are talking about that because you see the problem in physics now is we can't explain how quantum physics and relativity goes together. Nobody understands that. In fact, within quantum physics there are so many problems, isn't it? We can't understand how, Schrodinger's cat and all these things. Simultaneously, atom is a wave and a particle. There's so many problems. It's weird. In fact, Heisenberg said, anybody who says I understand quantum physics, he has not understood it. That's quantum physics. Now, many people, scientists, are trying to explain quantum physics. The weirdness is in that by the concept of hologram. And that's what our Vedas speak about. Om Purnamidam Purnamada. There's a hologram. There's a universe. That universe, exact what is there in universe, it is there in a body. It's mapped here. Exact what is mapped here, it is mapped in atoms. What is atoms, it is mapped in electrons. It goes like that. So, these Vedas are saying, Andam means body. Andam means universe. Pinda means body. Whatever is there in this body, it's there in universe. In this body, there's consciousness and matter. Similarly, this word is a body of superconsciousness. So but where is the proof of that? What does science say about it? Does science have to say something or nothing? Science, strictly academic science says universe is born of Big Bang, isn't it? Big Bang, and there is nothing, no superconscious, nothing. It's all atoms and this and that. We are a product of particles of dust, stardust, isn't it? They say like that. We're made of that. That's all finished. But that's not the point there. Science is trying to hint about superconsciousness. Superconsciousness, you can call it as God. Science likes to call it superconsciousness. We call it God. Or first proof of existence or hint of existence of superconsciousness comes from philosophy. Okay, let me ask you one thing. Let me just. What is this? Can I tell? Mic. Okay, fine. So what is it made of? Okay, plastic, yeah. And metal, silicon. Yeah, silicon chips. Okay, fine. Who made this? Huh? Like, can you tell me just by seeing this? No. Who actually who made this? Who? What's the name? What's the address? Who made this? We don't know. We can't tell by observation, isn't it? You have to have information for this. You have to have information who made this. By observation, you cannot tell. Okay. If you replace this mic with this word, by observation you can tell this word is made of electrons, protons, neutrons, but you cannot tell who made it. For that you need information. Science is observation, experimentation, theory, but just by observing this material world you can never tell who made this. You need information from somewhere else. That's the principle of first cause. Philosophers have been talking about that century long. That's true even today. There is something called as material cause and efficient cause. You can figure out the material cause of this by science, but not the efficient cause. Efficient cause means who made this. For that you need information from somewhere else, maybe from scriptures. But from somewhere you have to get information. So you see, philosophy is talking about superconsciousness and God as information and not just observation. It's beyond science. I attended a conference, so it was on Big Bang. And this this Nobel Prize winner, Vikram Singhe, he was one of the scientists in formation of Big Bang theory. He was where I was attending because I meet scientists. So I asked him. So one of the student, he asked him, okay, so you are telling everything began from Big Bang. So who banged that Big Bang? He's a student, you know. He's a student. What he'll ask. So that, you know what, but the answer surprised all of the people, you know. That Vikram Singh, he said, well, this question is not allowed in science. So, you can accept that first cause is an intelligent being, or you can accept first cause is nothing. Big Bang, basically, in one line is, nothing exploded into something, and then something happened to that something, and then that something converted into something, and then we had universe. What is this something and what is nothing? We can't explain anything, isn't it? So it is a metaphysical question. Who made this? Either you can say nothing made this, or you can say some person made this, isn't it? Now, which is a more plausible explanation? Even without knowing, even without having any information who made this, you can immediately conclude some person made this, some intelligence. And that's what. Some person made this. And who is that person? Who is that? You can read scriptures and you can know. That's philosophy. What about science? Go and read about him, Sir James Gate Jr. He's a physicist. He's a string theorist. You know string theory? You know that, no? So there are atoms, there are molecules, then you break into atoms, then you break into nucleus, electrons, protons, then quantums, then quarks are there. Then you go even 10 raised to the power minus 32 level, they are strings now, they are saying. They are trying to break reality and see what's there inside, you know, break. So now they are saying there are strings vibrating something. It's a mathematical model. So this person, he's a theoretical physicist. He said he was involved in the hunt of Higgs. You know Higgs boson, God particle? Yeah, he was involved in that. He's a famous theoretical scientist, and he is now saying there is computer code below strings. You break, you go below quarks, there is strings, and he's saying below strings there is a code running. Now it's coming from a physicist. You can't expect something like this coming from physicists, because physics don't believe. If there is a code running below strings, this means reality is coded. If reality is coded, then there has to be intelligent being. You have to you understand the implication. It's a big implication he's proposing. Of course, there are anti-arguments for this within scientific community, because it's a mathematical model. But nevertheless, from physics, something coming like this, it's a very big thing. And the last one is genetics. So what about genetics? Genetics give a hint about superconsciousness. You see this, okay, so you know in genes we have codes. You know this, no? Genetic code. Okay, CCATG, guanine, thymine and all. So okay, this is simple. So we say, okay, there's a code and a body is made of code. Simple, but that's not so simple. You see what's that? Can anybody read that? Jinky? Okay. Z-I-N-K-I. Suppose example, it's a code. It's a code. Now you can read the code. You can read the code, isn't it? But can you understand the meaning? Why? Why? You can read the code, but you cannot understand the meaning, because to understand the meaning of the code, you should know the meaning prior to reading it. Isn't it? You should know already the meaning, otherwise you can't relate to this. And that's the idea. There is a code in our genetics, but who is understanding that? To decode this, you have to understand it. But to understand it, you should already know the code and the meaning. And then there is a problem now. So that's what geneticists are surprised. They have given this question of syntax and semantics. This is called. Syntax is a code, the sequence. Semantics is the meaning. And they have given this question to philosophers. You handle it, we can't handle it. And that brings a picture of consciousness there. And superconsciousness. Superconsciousness, it understands the meaning of everything, because superconsciousness, and it helps to decode this because it understands the meaning already. And then when it reads, it can relate to it, and it helps to decode genetics. So by the way, I've written a book, Science Fails to Explain Life. What's he saying? I can't really. Yeah, you need to decode. Okay. Okay, fine. I'll just entertain. I've just finished now. So you see the problem there? Syntax, semantics, and it's a big problem. And I've written a book, Science Fails to Explain Life. So I was a genetic researcher, and as I read genetics, it stopped making sense to me. Because it's very complex and it's weird now. What happened is in genetics, so I was reading Vedas also. Vedas mentioned genetics. And the name of genes in Vedic, in Ayurveda is, we call it as genes, and they call it as, so the term Sanskrit name was given, Anvikshi, which you cannot see. Genes we can't see, isn't it? We can't see. If you ask any genetist, we can't see. We can just infer it by electrophoresis and all those things. Now the problem is, genes don't just have information, they also have time in it. That we don't know. That Vedas says, because genes get activated and deactivated at particular time. You know that, no? When a baby is formed. So there's time and there is superconsciousness to decode it. Otherwise it can't work. This mechanism can't work. And that's one of the hints which many philosophers of science are talking about. Genetics gives you a hint of a presence of superconsciousness. And the last is, the presence of superconsciousness or God, whatever, can be proved by science of sleep. Now, can anybody tell how does sleep give you proof of superconsciousness? Can anybody think about it? Every day, so it is said in Quran and Bible, Quran. It is said, Allah says that, so in fact, same thing is said in Vedas, same thing. God says, I give you the proof of my existence at every moment. Wise can see it, but fools cannot. There's a verse there. Now there's a proof when you sleep that there is superconsciousness. Superconsciousness means beyond your consciousness. Now God. So, can anybody think, how does this give you? Every night you have a proof. When you sleep and when you wake up. But we don't really think about it. Our whole life we lead unconsciously, let's put it like that. In a very little sense. We don't know what we are doing, we don't know why we are doing, and that's why we miss reality. We are not in touch with reality. As they say, we are in rat race, isn't it? It's eating, sleeping, that's all. We don't know what's happening around us, why these things are happening around us, but sleep is important. Okay, why? How does it help you to understand? No. No, let's say about deep sleep. Deep sleep, they're not dreams. And there's a proof there. And this is the first chapter of Vedas. First chapter. Even Bhagavad Gita talks about it. And in sleep a miracle happens. Every day. A miracle which you can't even imagine doing now. Can you, for even 1/millionth of a second, forget yourself? Can you do that? Yeah, while you're awake, close your eyes and try to forget yourself. Can you do that? It's impossible, isn't it? And if you think, yes, let me forget, then you are remembering yourself more. You cannot, but when you deep sleep, your I is erased. Not just you're forgetting, it's more than forgetting. Your consciousness is erased for 6 hours. You don't know who are you, whether you exist or not, that also you don't know. For 6 hours, not just 1 second, that's a miracle, which you cannot do consciously even for millionth of a second. That happens for 6 hours like this, without your effort. And then you wake up, and when you wake up, what's the first thing which comes to you? Your eye, isn't it? Yeah, I'm there. Who gives you back this eye? It's not you. That's the proof of super consciousness. Some other consciousness is doing something, is actually overpowering us. We are not doing that. Somebody else is doing. And that's what first chapter of Vedas are there. The existence of super consciousness, the proof, the science of sleep. Present science, we don't understand anything about sleep. The first department is opened in India about sleep in AIIMS, where I was working, medical college. And we only understand snoring, and that's all. That's all. And that too we don't understand snoring. We just know how to put oxygen there and control it. That's all. We have no idea about sleep. No idea. But even if we understand everything about sleep, but this miracle is a miracle, isn't it? And this is superconscious, and that's what is a proof or some evidence and hints about existence of superconsciousness and consciousness, which are separate from this body and brain. We can function without it, and that's the aim of life. To understand who we are. We are not this body. That's what is the aim of life. We have a connection with superconsciousness. That's God. And that's what is human life meant for. And that's the last quotation I can give you from John Searle. If anybody knows John Searle, he knows him. He's an American philosopher, University of California, Berkeley. He's a big philosopher, computers, mathematician, in one sense philosopher. He said, our problem is not that somehow we have failed to come up with a convincing proof of the existence of God or superconsciousness, and that the hypothesis of afterlife remains a serious doubt, consciousness, separate from body. It is rather in our deepest reflections we cannot take such opinions seriously due to a scientific worldview. Is a scientist saying. There's no lack of evidence. But due to a scientific paradigm, we are blocked. We are not allowed to think. Let me put it like that. Yeah, but it's very obvious if we approach the subject from a very broad perspective. And he recognized it, John Searle. He is a scientist, he is a philosopher, he recognized it. Because these people think, they are thinking. But we don't have time to think. We are not allowed to think, by the way. Our society is structured in a way we are not allowed to think. Because you have to earn money. You have to get a career. Then you have to go along with the life. You have to do this. And that's why all scriptures say, take out some time to give reflection, who you are, and perfect your life. And if you have some doubts regarding science, if you read from broad perspective, it will also lead you to the same way. And that's what this seminar is about. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. That's all. Thank you. It's done. Any questions, any comments now? Oh, that he's left. I couldn't understand his accent. It was Scottish accent or what? Oh, Irish. Yeah, he was. Okay, I understand. Yeah, he was speaking very fast. What's happening? Yes, Alice. Yeah, now you can ask me.
So, sorry, we create a new mechanism of consciousness, for example, and we align that to a mechanism of, say, God. And aren't we sort of missing the point? It should be sort of more natural, I guess.
Yeah, the first thing.
And that it's sort of something that we are doing because we have that sort of and like if love is just a mechanism of our new consciousness, it's just a symptom of consciousness.
Yeah.
Then we don't have like love. Then is just could be attachment, which is just a natural like a mechanical form that allows us to
No.
societal bonds and that sort of stuff. But sort of thing, because it might be a deeper understanding to these things. Like, for example, if
Yeah.
understand
Okay, fine. I'll understand your question. Now, I understand what you're asking. But you know what? You see, we have certain hints of, at least you understand this point, consciousness is separate from body. Is it? That's clear. We have some hints for that. Theoretically, consciousness is separate from, okay. And then there is superconsciousness, okay. Till this we have reached. Now, and function of consciousness I have told you. Now, okay, tell me. If you want to go beyond this point, now tell me this question. Do you understand swimming first and then you swim? Or first you swim and then understand? First you swim. You can't understand swimming by just reading, isn't it? And that's the difference between formal sciences and a skill. Mathematics, chemistry, and that you understand, then apply. But skill, first you apply and then understand, isn't it? Cycling, swimming. So that this field of consciousness, it's subjective, it's your experience. To a certain extent, we can help you understand consciousness separate from body, and okay, you're not this body. But then if you want to go beyond this, you have to apply the process and then see for yourself. You got my point?
I do. I just, is it a problem of knowledge? Yes, okay.
Okay. Okay. And that's why I put this slide, follow to see. Now you have to follow up a process. You have to follow the process. Now we have theoretically understood consciousness separate from body, but we have not realized it, isn't it? You have not realized this fact. To realize this, you have to jump in the water. Just like you have to learn swimming. To realize this, you have to follow the process, and that's what that's where the role of mantras and God's name chanting comes. When you apply this process, then you start understanding, realizing this. You got the point there? How consciousness is helping in thinking, feeling, and willing. What is exactly feeling? That has to be realized and experienced then by following a process. And that is why you need to follow a process after a limit. That is why Veda says, Achinte khalue bhava. After some point, the words will recede back. Every person has to follow on his own. And then understand on his own, he is separate from this body. Because consciousness, the experience of consciousness is subjective. It is only for you. So I can understand for myself, I am separate from this body. If I practice, you can understand for yourself, isn't it? Like for example, this shirt. Now, we wear this, now you have been wearing this shirt whole day, isn't it? Okay, fine. Okay. Okay, just put it on. Okay, now you are wearing now. Now you'll go back your home. Will you have any fear of removing this shirt? No. There. Yeah. Will you have any fear of removing this shirt? No. No, why? But it's there on your body. But you're convinced you're not this. That's why you don't have a fear. Yeah. But we are not convinced we are not this body. We are not this. We are not convinced. That's why we have fear of death. And we have so many fears. Although this shirt is also there on our body 24 hours. But we are convinced. We will never be confused that we are this shirt. It will never happen. That's called realization. So we don't have a realization that we are separate from body. We have theory now. But to realize, you have to practice. That's how it goes.
I'm just thinking now, I'm 71 years old, and I still am not 71 years old in my head.
Yeah.
That, to me, in many ways, proves that my consciousness is very different from my body.
That's true. Yeah, you're right, actually, yeah. Nobody thinks he's old in his mind. Isn't it? Every old man thinks he is still young. Why is that? Now that's another question here. And yeah, it is a question for psychologists, by the way. And this problem is named as the identity problem. There's a name for this, and they're trying to figure out why, but they can't figure out. But the answer is given in Vedas. Why is that? Because consciousness is inherently eternal, and it doesn't die. So because we are consciousness, we don't like to think like that we are becoming old, because we are always like that, but this body is getting old. So we have this understanding there. And so and that is why we fear death, because we don't die, but this body dies. But we identify with this body and we get fear. And there's another question in Vedas. Why do we want to become happy? You see? Why don't we want to become sad? It's a common sense question. Why don't you want to become sad? One day fine morning you get up and, it will be so nice. Today I'll become sad. It never happens like that. Everybody wants to become happy. Why? Because consciousness is linked to superconsciousness. That's the link. And superconsciousness is a source of happiness. And that we have experience of that happiness. That is why we always want that happiness. We never want sadness. You see the point? So this is all questions. This is all. That is why it is said, to understand your consciousness separate from body, you don't need science, you need common sense. But common sense is uncommon. That's unfortunate.
And I'm just thinking that in one way the whole concept of eternity is totally illogical. It is illogical because we have no experience of anything lasting.
Here in this word?
Yeah.
Yeah, in this word, yeah.
We have none.
Yeah. There is just one thing, eternal, your own self, consciousness, that's all.
Where does that come from?
Yeah, you're right. That concept of eternity, where does it come? It comes from you, because you are eternal. Otherwise, nothing is eternal. No experience, nothing is eternal. So, all these philosophers were talking about that. Plato and Socrates and all these philosophers in our Vedic tradition, they have been talking about all these things. Self-reflection, that's called. Self-reflection. For which we don't have time now. Isn't it? That's the problem there. Otherwise, Vedas begin, any donkey can become self-realized. Anybody can become self-realized if you ponder over these questions. You don't need super duper rocket science. You need to sit, think and read. And then self-reflect. It's very simple. Prabhupada said, no? Even a child can understand. Simply have to know and think and discuss and come and discuss with wise people. That's what we have to do. And you perfect your life and help others perfect their life. If you can understand you're not this body, your consciousness, you're eternal, you don't die. It's over, That's why one philosopher, he said, everybody in this world has fear. A rich man fears poverty. A poor man fears exploitation. A beautiful man fears becoming ugly. Beautiful man or woman. And an ugly man fears rejection and condensation. Isn't it? An old man fears death. A young man fears becoming old. A child fears insecurity. A king fears revolt. A scholar fears debate. And in the end he writes, who is not in fear? And he said, there's this one man who is not in fear, who is self-realized, who knows himself. That's where Vedas begin. That's what we should be doing. So please chant Hare Krishna. If you want to realize all these things, we have to chant the names and discuss Gita. Come in this program. I think... Okay, you can announce. Before that, I'll just say I've written 2 books. If you want to have a look, you can just have a look. There's one book, Crazy Ideas. Whatever, I've been talking so many things, science, philosophy. In this book, I have written all the questions you'll possibly encounter on the street or within yourself. Like, you might say, there's so many scriptures but different messages, no? Quran says something, Bible says something, Vedic scripture says something. There's so many gods, what's happening? And then, for example, yoga, what's yoga all about? There's a lot of talk of yoga. Why should we be vegetarian? What's that all about? What is ghost? Isn't it? All these questions are there in this book, and I've answered from philosophy, from theosophy, from theology, from religion, from all over the place. I've collected all the arguments, what those people say, and put in this book. So it'll give you a very broad understanding. It's not just Prabhupada said this. You can't preach like that, isn't it? You can't say Prabhupada said this. Who is this? Prabhupada. So preaching needs to have a broad view. And also for yourself, it's good to be convinced, that what we are following, it's not just a sectarian thing. Everybody has said this from different perspectives. That's one thing. So all these ideas are there in this book. I've handled this. And you can read this. And there is this book I've written, Mighty Efforts. This is for devotees who are practicing. I've been giving seminars now. To understand that your consciousness separate from body and connect with super consciousness, that relationship, you need to put efforts. There's no free lunch. So, how to put those efforts scientifically so that your efforts don't go waste? What are the milestones when you're advancing in devotion that you know that you're in the right direction? Because this is science. So all these things I've mentioned in this book. So anybody who wants to have a look on them, you can have a look. And then I have this pen drives. Some devotees have already given. This is my lectures. All these seminars and many other, because I preach science. So I have many seminars, mind and machine, consciousness and beyond, science will explain life. The videos are there in this. Many videos. And 200 hours of audios are there. Many lectures on Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, and so many other things. You can keep on hearing. There's my mail. We can discuss some questions on that, on Christianity, on Islam, on Hinduism, on Bhagavad Gita, on soul, on God. So if anybody wants to have a look, you can have a look. And again, thank you very much for coming. Hare Krishna. 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 Hare Krishna.